Everyone, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I just realized that my settings here. Okay, good. I'm all set here. All right, so it's Charlene Lee, and I am excited today to talk about culture. And it is such an important topic, and especially with AI coming into our organizations, how do we prepare our cultures to be AI ready and able to take on the tremendous change and transformation that's going to happen and is happening because of AI. So I would love for you to share, say hello and say where you're coming from today, and also share how are you preparing your culture to support your AI strategy. So we're going to talk a lot about what culture change looks like, how we can expect culture to change, what you can do to provide support for your organization for the tremendous amount of change and transformation that's going to happen with AI. So I do have some slides today. I will put those up. I'll also put them into the comments and hopefully somebody can share them into LinkedIn because I can't for whatever reason. And you can get the slides here. So I call this a messy middle of culture change because the reality is uh, it is incredibly messy. I wish there was a orderly way to talk about AI and strategy and the culture you need to have. And the reality, it is just this backwards and forwards and all the way around approach to handling AI strategy in general, but especially the culture change that's going to happen. And I say this with a lot of respect for the organizations who are going through this. It is a real struggle. It is extremely hard to change your culture. And I can say that having worked with quite a few organizations to go through a digital transformation over the past 10, 15 years, again, this is the thing that many companies really stumble on because you can have the most beautiful, beautiful culture. And the reality is that it's not going to, I'm sorry, you can have the most beautiful strategy. And if your culture isn't well tuned to accept that strategy, it's going to be like planting all these beautiful seeds and ideas of innovation and change into just barren ground. And if you don't water it, if you don't fertilize it, if you don't nurture the strategy with a really healthy culture, it will die. So I really want to spend some time today and talk about how incredibly important it is. Thank you, Jay, for posting up the slides too. I really appreciate it. It's always great to see you here. And in particular, I want to talk a bit about how important this culture is. And the major reason, you may have seen this before earlier, that if we have this push and pull culture going on right now with AI, we have a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out, people wanting to go faster in adopting AI, but there's also a lot of fogey, fear of getting in. And this is really this tremendous tension that's happening. I love this one statistic that I saw recently from the Stanford AI study. It's something they've been publishing for the past 3 years. And one of the most interesting statistics is the amount of people, percentage of people within a country that believe that AI is going to be beneficial versus the percentage who would believe it's going to be harmful. And so in China, for example, 83% of people believe AI is going to be more beneficial than harmful. And here in the United States, it's actually very different. It's 39% of people, only 39% of people believe that AI is going to be beneficial versus harmful. So more people believe in the United States that AI is going to be harmful than beneficial. So if you're trying to create AI strategy, trying to transform your organization with AI, you're facing this uphill battle that's just ingrained in our culture here as a country in the US. And I'm speaking from a very US centric perspective here, that you are facing an uphill battle to not only have an AI strategy, but also the sort of predominant way of thinking about AI is to be very suspicious of it, to think that more bad things are going to come from it than good things. So Again, here's some interesting stats from Jay also. Generally, American workers are about 39% in favor of utilizing AI in the workplace. Again, very similar kind of statistics. Again, 72%. And I think a lot of the reason, Jay, is that it's primarily that again, China has been on this road of embracing technology. They, as a government, have been pushing adoption of AI, self-driving cars. What used to be mobile phone companies are now autonomous driving vehicle companies. So it's so interesting to see how the culture has that a government and businesses and people have really embraced AI as a future opportunity for growth in the country. Versus here in the US, we again have more to lose than to win, whereas in China there is more to win and keep winning. I visited China again right before the pandemic, and I came back, and I've been visiting China for quite a few years. I'm Chinese in background, and I've always come back and just think, my goodness, there is so much energy, there is so much passion and ambition built into the culture there that a lot of other countries and cultures just simply do not have. And I think AI is again that next edge of where that ambition can go. So just going back to the conversation here again, I do believe that culture eats strategy for breakfast every single day. That if you have a great culture and then you have a okay strategy, you will always win because your culture will figure out how to make the strategy work. But if you have a great strategy, but an okay or even not well functioning culture, your strategy is just going to die. So, again, we'll talk a little bit today about how to build a culture. So, I believe that there are 5 beliefs of an AI ready culture. And by all means, just add your comments here about what you are interested, any questions that you may have about strategy, but also just please share what are you doing to prepare your culture? How are you preparing yourself as a leader? And I'll talk about leader in the future live stream in the next one. But I wanted to really focus today on culture. So again, these are places where the slides are. So my very first belief of an AI ready culture is speed. And the reason why speed is so important is because AI is changing so quickly that you can't analyze and sit there and try to make things go perfectly right. Try to understand everything that's happening before you can decide to take an action. And so the whole idea is that you're going to prioritize momentum and speed and decision making over perfection. And this is not the way that most organizations work. And so the pressure to understand and master AI, so to speak, is not going to be possible. I feel like I am still just beginning to figure out how to use these technologies. For example, I feel like I've pretty much mastered Google search. I feel like I'm pretty good at it. When it comes to AI, I keep getting surprised constantly. Like, oh, you can do this with that. This is how you can do a better prompt. What are these agents? What can they do? So the ability to try things, feel comfortable, again, that a speed of adoption and experimentation is absolutely essential. Another key area is to focus. And again, this has to go with the overwhelming number of options and areas you could go and explore. You will go insane, you will go mad if you try to learn everything. So instead, really focus on doing a few things better, doing things just well. Maybe not again mastering, just keep doing it and better. So focus and speed together on just a few areas. And this is, again, the whole idea. Strategy is about making integrated choices about what you will do and also what you won't do. All right. The next area is to ask why, to constantly be testing your assumptions. What are the things that you need to keep improving? And in particular, stay curious about. Keep going and learning and experimenting. The biggest challenge I hear inside of most organizations is that they say, well, that's the way we do things around here. Then the response to that, the only response to that can be, well, why is that? Why do we do things this way? And to say, well, could there be a better way, a different way of doing this? And even when you establish, well, this is a good way to do it with AI, keep asking, why does this work? Why do we keep doing it this way? Could there be another way that we could do things better? Okay, let's talk about just keep learning. Again, this is going back to again that staying constantly learning, staying humble, keep growing, and then the final area is again having a shared purpose. And the reason I put this in here is that again, this is part of focus. Again, these are all beliefs that we are reinforcing of each other. The idea here is when you're trying to transform an organization, it's so easy to get pulled into different directions. Well, I want my little pet peeve of a pet project for AI to go forward, and forget about everyone else. This is the thing that's really important to my team, my department, my product, my customer versus focusing on what are the biggest transformational things that are going to move the entire organization forward and advance your overall business strategy. Now, there is a key balance here because there are some things you can do as an enterprise and you can also do as a department. Again, we've talked about that in previous live streams that there are multiple levels of strategy. But again, having a clear sense of purpose of what you're trying to achieve, the shared strategic objectives is extremely important. And so I share those five beliefs because, again, just having done a lot of research now with Katja, and we're just finishing up the book, and we looked and said, what are these? What are the common themes across all of these companies that are doing a really good job of not only creating a strategy, but of also executing it? And these five beliefs kept coming up over and over again. And just a quick thing, I do believe that we do believe that culture is simply made up of beliefs and behaviors. So the things that you believe and the behaviors that are driven by those beliefs. So if you don't like your culture, then change your beliefs. All right, let's see what other things we have. I have Faburama coming in from Ethiopia, from Gambia. Thank you so much for joining today too, as well. Again, I hope that you'll share also um, where you're coming from and how are you supporting your culture to be supportive of your AI strategy. All right, let me go on and talk a little bit about why traditional change management approaches to again to using and adopting AI just fall short. Again, there are a lot of good best practices around change management, and you can try applying them, and some of them may work. But the problem is that oftentimes change management, the first one is that it's saying we're going from this space to that space. We're going from this state to that state. Right now, there is no fixed future state. So traditional change management says we're going to go through this change. We're going to go from point A to point B. We don't know where point B is. We have an idea. We have an idea of the general direction of movement of that strategy where we want to go, but it's not completely fixed. And so it can be very frustrating to say, what if you just do this change, we're going to be good. The reality is, we're saying instead, we're going through this change. We're not quite sure we're going to end up. We know we're going to transform. We know we're going on this journey and we have a direction of travel, but we're not quite sure we're going to be. And this is more typical of what transformations look like. And so preparing your organization for this is extremely important. We don't know exactly what the impact is going to be. Again, we have an idea, we have ambitions, we have targets and goals, but again, it can be very unpredictable. Again, this is a very messy space that we are in. The pace of change exceeds what traditional change cycles have. So again, the pace again of the speed is much faster than we can typically account for traditional change. Again, change management requires that you plan, that you have steps that you take, and then you can actually implement that change plan. The pace of change here is so fast, you start changing and then you realize, oh, it's going to be moving in a different direction. Also, the change cycle is much bigger. This is not a change that's just going to happen over a couple of weeks and months. We're talking about months and years. And so it needs to be sustained in a very different level. And the reality is change fatigue is very, very real. Change fatigue happens when You're constantly changing, and then you don't feel like it's ever change. You actually never get there. And so you just get exhausted for never having achieved everything that you're putting all this really hard, genuine effort into. And so, anticipating change fatigue, having gates where you can stop and say, this is where we are at. Let's look around. How are we doing? Making sure everyone is here, celebrate a little bit, and then continue on. So, transformational change is very different than traditional change management. And so, I do want to say that these are some of the key challenges that we have for managing change and culture change in particular with AI. So, what do you do about this? Well, we think that there are a couple things. Again, this is some ways around the traditional ways of changing and changing beliefs. But we do believe, again, this is not just change management. You have to change the fundamental underlying beliefs of your culture towards those five areas. So, the first phase is understanding what are the hidden beliefs of your organization. And one exercise I highly encourage is to sit down as a team, as a department, as a leadership team, for example, and write down it individually on post it notes on pieces of paper and say, what are the beliefs that we believe are holding us back? And what are the behaviors that are exhibited that reflect those beliefs? What are the things that we believe and behave that are holding us back? And put them all in the middle of the table. Just stick them all there. And then as a group, start sorting through them and understanding, oh, these are the beliefs that are in common with each other. And then look at them and say, which of these beliefs that all of us agree no longer serve us? And then the whole idea is you reframe it. You take that old belief and say, instead, what are the new beliefs we want to put in place? So we agree that we're not going to believe this old belief. And instead, every time we see somebody or behaving with that belief in mind, so anytime we see that belief exhibited as a behavior or somebody says that belief, we reinforce the new belief and say, no, remember, we agreed not to believe the old thing. We're going to do the new one. And then you measure it to say, is this actually happening? Are the behaviors actually changing that reflect the new belief? And then you can go back again and find another belief and do this again and again and again. So I've seen this work. I was very involved with a very large organization where they realized that their old belief structures were really holding them back. They wanted to become a very different kind of company. They wanted to become much more customer centric, over 100 years old. And they said, we need to change this. And so they wrote a culture manifesto. These are our new beliefs. They each identified in their division. Again, this is a large global organization. Each leader decided, well, this is the fundamental belief that had to change inside the organization, and went back and said, I'm going to single mindedly change this one belief. And that's it. Again, they could each choose a different belief depending on the thing that was holding that particular organization back. And they made sure that they replicated that, reinforced that, and then just constantly made sure that people understood how to do this. And over 6 months, they changed the beliefs of the organization to this new belief culture manifesto that they had. So again, this is something you can do, but it has to be very intentional. It has to be driven by leadership. And it has to be something that is aligned across the entire organization, that you are going to change your culture from one belief to a new belief. And one of the things that I find very helpful in this is to understand the power of centrally doing this from the center, but also doing it from the edge. So things that need to be driven from the center, again, that leadership is again the standards, the beliefs, the incentives, the governance around it, but also shared resources, expertise. These new beliefs are going to have behaviors. And so having that to be driven from the center around expectations is really important, but it's also much more, not so much around stopping things, but enabling this new belief to spring up and to be nurtured. But then there's also beliefs that need to change on the edge. And this contextual adaptation. What I found so interesting in this organization is that The organization said, this is the old belief, this is the new belief. And then they let people express that belief in so many different ways. So people could understand it, tell their own stories around it. Again, this is a great way to live your values and live your beliefs, in that it could really just change and adapt and be applied to whatever circumstances people were in. And then also that they could innovate and experiment around a lot of these new beliefs. And again, even though they were set at the corporate level, at the center, from the center, the actual expression of it could be, it was again, just so many different ways that people adopted and put into practice this new belief. So I do believe that this is something that is so important for us to understand and be able to again adapt and change, because when you're thinking about culture change, it is something again that has to be very intentional. So I do want to share just one example. This is a case study of an organization that I worked with. And one of the things they had done over the years is they had this beautiful value of respect, and over time, that value of respect had morphed from what the founder originally wanted, which is respect that anybody and good ideas could come from anywhere, to it had morphed somehow into that when you're in a meeting, you could not disagree with the most senior person in the room because that would be disrespectful. So respect had morphed from this original beautiful way, this beautiful value, to shutting down discussion, shutting down disagreement. And as a result, innovation had just slowed to a crawl. Because if somebody didn't agree with the most senior person in the room, after the meeting ended, they had to go around to every other person in the and who was in the meeting and say, "Hey, do you think that this is a valid point that I could bring up?" And everybody would have to agree. And then that person could set up a meeting with that senior person, go and say, "Look, I talked to everybody and we all agree that this might be a different point of view that we may want to consider at our next meeting." And so again, they just said, "This is something that we all agree just could not work." And so they really had to go and say, how do we reframe this value of respect? So they went back to the original meaning, went back to the original clips of the founder talking about this value, and then reframed behaviors. For example, leaders would speak only for the first 5 minutes and encourage everyone else to give their opinion, to disagree, to have different ideas. They would call on people, they would encourage people to speak up. And so, and again, always grounding it in the value of respect. So again, and they knew that this would take a long time. So they set parameters for this to take 12 months, a whole year of intentional setting of rituals and using stories and using symbols to to foster this new belief around respect. Again, this new reframing of it. So again, I do want to just encourage you to think about what are the beliefs that are holding you back. Again, do that little exercise. Figure out all the things that could be holding you back from really taking on AI, because AI is going to change and challenge so many of the things that you do as an organization. Again, just think about speed. What are your beliefs around speed? That, again, we can't do things at fast. We can't make decisions quickly unless we are going to make sure they are perfect. Well, how do you trade that off then? How do you get around this belief that things have to be perfect, that you can't make mistakes, that we can have failures and not be completely decimated by that? How do we be able to celebrate successes and setbacks and be able to anticipate them at the same time? And then instead, think about the beliefs that you are going to have to adopt to help you move forward. So, systematically going through your culture and identifying these beliefs, reframing them, reinforcing the new beliefs, and then measuring the behaviors to see if things have actually changed is the key thing to have to do. All right. So, this is my contact information. You can get the slides again. Let me just put them up right there. You can get the slides at bit.ly/messy-middle-culture. Again, I can't express again enough. It sounds fairly simple to change culture. Pick your old beliefs, switch them to the new beliefs. It's an incredibly messy process, and it is gut wrenching at times. It is your palms will be just sweating like crazy, and that's how you know you're doing it the right way. All right, I just want to check and see if there were any other comments. All right, I have this particular comment. Is it a good idea to drive AI transformation from the strategic level as a program with a proper program charter and focus on the outcomes rather than the outputs? Great program, great question, Rajdeep. So I think in particular, you have let me just put your comment back up here. I think again, again, it has to be driven at the strategic level. Absolutely driven at the strategic level. But at the same time, this is not necessarily, again, I just want to take issue with a proper program, program charter, because again, that strategy has to be there. But what do you define as proper? I think the reality is your AI strategy, I like to say that it needs to be written in pencil because probably most likely going to change. And so again, but I think your key point here is that the outcomes are much, much, much more important than the outputs because we're not quite sure what the outputs are going to be. And people will constantly ask, well, what's the ROI of AI? It's a wrong question to ask. That is an output. You're looking for a particular number. And I think the outcome is something very different. Can we achieve our strategic goals better, faster, cheaper? In the past, there's an old saying, you can do those three things, but pick two of the three. I believe with AI, you can actually do all three. You can give it a good try. Again, that's the kind of transformation, the outcome that you want, rather than the output of saying, well, what exactly are we going to, how much cheaper are we going to do it by? Because if you're only trying to drive efficiency and productivity gains to cut your expenses, cut number of people, you are missing the transformational power of AI. If you could do things better, do things differently, reinvent the organization, what is that worth? You can't put a number against that. Not at this point. But again, I think again, it's the power of transformation. You don't ask what's the ROI of transformation. Instead, you're thinking about what the outcome is going to be. So I think that's a better way. And thank you, Rajdeep, too, for thinking about and asking that. That's a great question to ask. All right, I'm just checking here to see if there are any other questions and comments. Not right now at this point. I just see Dr. Carney. I don't have my glasses on today. Coming in from Florida, so thank you very much for joining too as well. Jay, again, thank you so much for posting all of the links and joining today. And for all of you, again, by all means, think about what culture is that is important to you. I would love for you to share with me. You reach out to me by my email, charlene@charlenelee.com. Reach out to me on my various social media channels. I read everything. Please stay in touch. I would love to hear what are the challenges that you are facing with culture change? What are the things that you are finding to be working? And also just how are you moving through the messy middle of AI strategy? All right, that's what I have for today. I'll be off next week. I'm traveling. I'm speaking down in Florida. I'm looking forward to being warm, getting out of the San Francisco fog and cold. And I'll be in 2 weeks on May 13th. It's already May. How is that possible? I'll be talking about the other flip side of culture, which is leadership. For those of you who know me, I am passionate about leadership because I think that is the foundation for any sort of transformational change. So we'll be talking about how to lead and create, again, an AI ready organization. I'll see you then. By all means, stay curious out there, experiment, and please stay in touch. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks. Bye-bye.